Hi all, I have another fantastic game to show you today. Magnus Carlsen against Hikaru Nakamura. This was played in the London Chess Classic of 2011. So the London Chess Classic, this was the third London Chess Classic, so it was a 9-player round robin played at the Olympia Conference Centre in Kensington, London, England, 3rd to the 12th of December. And it's part of the London Chess Classic Festival, so that had a number of other events. I've sometimes played in the FIDE Open as part of that festival. Now, to discourage draws, actually, the players receive 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. Time control 120 minutes for the first 40 moves, 60 more minutes for the next 20 moves, and then 15 minutes for the rest of the game, with 30 seconds added per move from move 61. So let's have a look at this game. So Magnus kicking off with e4. Hikaru plays e5. We have knight f3, knight c6, and now the Italian game, bishop c4. So this is the Italian game. Bishop b5 is the more kind of bog standard Roy Lopez. But we have Magnus slightly going off the beaten path a little bit here. Knight f6. We have d3. This is a quiet continuation. In fact, after bishop c5, this is actually called usually the gioco pianissimo. Not piano, but pianissimo. So gioco pianissimo. Excuse the pronunciation or the butchering. So c3 here, d6, and the bishop actually drops back. There's a few high-level stem games of Magnus Carlsen himself playing castling here. For example, a6, a4 happened in Carlsen against Vichy Anand in the Leuven tournament of 2016. So that game, let's have a quick flick through. You can see White actually played for an f-file strategy here, leaving the rook here. So this may be a pattern which Magnus likes when he's playing the Italian game, just to get the crossfire on f7, use that rook on f1, and there's pressure on f7. And Magnus actually went on eventually to win this game. Let's have a quick flick through. So that invasion on central rank, kicking the pieces back a bit, getting quite a nice, very strong knight on c5. So black's pretty tied down here. And soon Magnus converted this position, it seems. After g4, black's pretty tied down and winning a pawn, and actually Vichy resigned there. So that's one high-level stem game here with the move castling instead of bishop b3. So bishop b3, very interesting to put maybe the bishop on c2 earlier than usual. We also have h6, that's another stem game. I won't play through that. That's Carlsen against Adams, Weekend Z 2016, which Carlsen also went on to win. Starting from there, he won eventually in 65 moves. So he's got good experience in this variation. So bishop b3 was played in this particular game example. a6, knight bd2. The bishop drops back to a7. And now a Steinitz kind of maneuver. Instead of castling, the problem with castling is that the rook's on f1, and maybe you don't want the rook on f1 if you're going to play knight f1 to g3 later. So there's an acceleration of this, which I'm pretty sure comes from a Steinitz game originally. Let me know in the comments if you think otherwise. I originally saw this concept in quite a beautiful Steinitz game. So the knight going to g3 first, then castling, so not getting in the way. Black played h6 here. Castling here, allowing bishop g5, is not fatal, by the way, for black. It seems this should be a reasonable position, and even maybe even technically this looks a little bit strange, but maybe this is possible with an even position technically. That bit of provocation. So anyway, h6 was played though to discourage bishop g5. Clearly, we have knight g3. Both sides do castle here. Bishop e6. And now h3, so both sides are offering this kind of ear. Sometimes I've heard it being called, not seen it being called, heard it being called an ear on the side. Sometimes the ears can be like attacked, a bishop sacrifice, and it looks as though black's gearing up for a bishop sack here, but it's mostly harmless right now. We have bishop e3. So now knight e7. Black really perhaps doesn't want to play bishop takes e3 because it's really encouraging this rook to be activated, and in this particular situation, an exchange sacrifice is in the air, and that would be a terrible weakness, immediate compensation for an exchange sac. So black has to be concerned here about playing a move like bishop takes e3. So we have actually knight e7. Black actually imitates white's knight maneuvers. Okay, so knight e7. But we have knight h4. White is first to get to a sensitive square here, the f5 square. We have knight g6. Now knight hf5. It doesn't look particularly right to just double the pawns for the sake of doubling the pawns. Black would have some rook activity. This should be about equal. There's some compensation there. So knight hf5. This looks like a small edge for white right now. We have knight e7 challenging that. Knight takes e7, queen takes, and simplification, quite a bit of simplification there. However, does white maintain a small edge after f4 with a default rook on f1? So not having to move that rook back, that's another perk. It's still a little bit maybe of a concern, this f-file. We have c5. If e takes f4, the concern grows a bit quicker in a more accelerated fashion here. This position, for example, there might be exchange sacrifices in the air. If black dared take that, this looks absolutely winning, for example. This kind of thing. With queen f4, if king h7, knight f5, just to put that on the board, and you can see the devastation of the exchange sac. It's difficult to defend there. And if queen b5, yeah, this is still devastating. Black would have to give up the queen. So black has to be very concerned about potential exchange sacrifices. So c5, we have bishop c2, b5, queen d2, and also black needs to be concerned about not getting squished here. The rook's protecting a2, so if black does something like knight d7, there's f5 winning the bishop. So black has to tread carefully. Rook b7. It looks as though black's plan is to play for b4. We have a3, trying to take a file, potentially if a5, b4. a5 is played, rook f2. b4, and white does play a takes, activating the rook. But actually the a file is not really of great interest. Rook af1 is played. And this supercharges the idea of a potential exchange sacrifice on f6. We have b takes, e takes f4, rook takes, and it's definitely looking on the cards. Black goes away from that square, knight h7. So if we look at it here, this looks like it should be big trouble for black, and it is. This will just be winning. If black does desperate stuff, it's pointless. It's going to get mated. So knight h7, we have d4, c takes. There is another problem here for black emerging. This pawn could be vulnerable in some variations later. Also, it looks as though the bishop's kind of dangerously poised on this diagonal. We have to move g5 here. As another example, if d5 had been played, it seems white could play e takes, and here knight f5 looks very juicy actually. This is a very juicy attack already against the king side. Black, I believe, is falling to pieces here. For example, like this. And if queen takes h6, then this tactic would win the rook. So black has to be careful about any invasions which could backfire. So we have queen g5, not d5, and king h2, so protecting the knight. Knight f6. The knight goes back. Is that a dangerous idea? Right now this rook's pinned to d2. If rook c8 was played, maybe, this looks about even actually. It looks as though white's not really able to do too much with this position. If rook fb8, again, I mean, there's a tempo game with h4, but it doesn't seem too bad if the knight can sit on f8 protecting h7 against this e5. And if white tries to evolve an attack, for example like this, it's not entirely, black's not entirely without resources coming down to the first rank sometimes. And this is very, very interesting. For example, this is just a fictional continuation where white has to tread carefully because of this rook takes this rook takes bishop. So if white wants to try and maintain equality, bishop d1, it should be about even. Yeah, rook takes, and the rook takes here is black's actually doing quite well. So white has to be, concerned about the queenside counterplay. So knight f6, the rook's pinned for the moment. Bishop d1. So this gets out of some tactical issues potentially. Rook fb8, and it also supports the h5 square sometimes. And in fact, we see after h4, queen g6, this support of the h5 square with this bishop on d1 is very, very handy now in this position. Guess what Magnus plays here for 500 points. So you might want to pause the video. I'll give you 10 seconds just for the stream as well. 10 seconds starting from now. White to play. Okay. White did actually indulge the exchange sacrifice with rook takes f6. We have g takes, queen f4, and now the rook comes to the second rank. So the knight's kind of pinned to g2 here. So is this worth it? There's no knight h5 because the queen takes g2 mate. And also there's another trick here, even more subtle. If queen takes f6 was played, this wasn't played, but if it was played, guess what black can play here, which is actually quite crushing. And this would have made Nakamura's day, I expect, if queen takes f6 had been played, because 10 seconds for 500 points. Black to play. The queenside counterplay is made to be meaningful after rook takes g2. King takes rook b2 check. Now if rook f2, queen takes f6, that rook's pinned, so can't counter there. And here, after rook b2 check, if king h1, queen takes g3, and this is devastating, threatening mate on g2 and h2. And there's no pin either because of rook h2 checkmate, so it doesn't have to be the queen doing the checkmate. And if here, this is, it's devastation. So Magnus has to trade carefully. Bishop h5 first. So queen g7. So at the moment, he's a raw exchange now. Not even a single pawn. Not even a single sausage, as they say sometimes. Not a sausage for the exchange. But bishop f3 secures g2. Means that now knight h5 is on the cards to try and get at least a pawn for the exchange. We have rook a8. If queen g6, it seems white can play d5 and bishop h5 with an interesting position here. Actually, in this particular configuration, it seems it's possible to indeed play queen takes f6. There's no such major tactics as before. And if that's the case, d6 and f7 attacked. So there's a pawn there, there's another pawn there. There should be very, very big compensation for white. Two very dangerous pawns in the center. So we have rook a8. Now d5, bishop c8, knight h5. So Magnus does seem set to get at least a pawn for the exchange. Queen f8. If queen g6 had been played here, then queen takes d6 seems very, very nice. Just taking that centre pawn out. And here, taking another pawn, 2 pawns for the exchange. And this position still evolves for white to be much better. Much, much better. So this is a huge position for white. So basically we have queen f8. But now knight takes f6, king h8. At least d6 cannot be taken. That's the point there. So, but we have now rook c1. This is a very, very strong position. In fact, it seems as though e5 is also possible, not just rook c1. Technically, e5 looks very strong. For example, d takes, queen takes. If rook b6, knight e8, discovered check. And if f6, there's a really interesting tactic in this position for 200 points, if you can guess it. White to play here, there's a mega tactic. Okay. Bishop e4, yeah, pinning that pawn. And if here, that's actually checkmate here. The knight's covering the g7 escape square. So it's a fascinating position where it seems as though e5 is strong, as well as what was played. If we just go back here for a moment, instead of f takes, if bishop a6, then rook takes f6. So that's lethal. If rook takes, there's things like rook e6, discover check, winning the rook. And if here, knight takes, this is just very nice for white. So rook c1, though, very, very interesting as well. Access to that 7th rank. King g7. And now e5 was played here. D takes. Knight h5 check. This is a very, very strong position. Queen takes e5 is also possible. For example, king h8, knight e8 check, f6. Here, there's just knight takes f6. And here, knight h5 check, d6, and things are getting really nasty. For example, winning material like this. So it is looking like a very, very bad position. So anyway, queen takes is also strong. Knight h5 check was played. After king h7, here, bishop e4. And actually, Nakamura felt compelled to resign in this position. So why did he resign? Let's have a look. So black resigned here. If f5, well, if king g8 to start off with, let's have a look at king g8. Queen g3 check, queen takes e5 check, knight takes. This is just winning lots of material. And also the king is being hunted. If queen takes, queen g7 is checkmate. This is just all over for black's king safety with no counterattack there. So that's one example. So let's go back. So in this position, after bishop e4 check, let's try something else. If f5, that opens up that second rank. So check, queen g3, queen takes e5 check, knight f6 check. Black would have to give up the queen because otherwise king h8, rook h7 is checkmate. So black gives up the queen and just gets checkmated. Yeah, it's pretty hopeless really. Instead of f5, if king h8, then queen f6 check. And rook c3 is a crusher here for rook g3. That's a real crusher. If black has to give up, well, it's pointless to give up material. It's just to stave off being checkmated. So yeah, it is a pretty crushing game and position after bishop e4. So this exchange sack really weakened black's king. It fragmented the pawns around the king and made it easier to get this devastating attack here, this final position. It was a very, very interesting tournament. At this point in 2011, Magnus wasn't world champion. He did very well in this tournament. He came third. Kramnik actually won it with 16. Hikaru came second with 15, and Magnus third with 14 points. So it was a very, very tough tournament, and a very instructive game. It was actually Nakamura's only loss, it seems, in this tournament. It was his only defeat. Okay, so a very, very instructive game there. If you want to check out Magnus's first course on Chessable, which a lot of people have been involved in, a lot of celebrities, excellent IMs and GMs, check out Kingscrusher TV / Magnus course. So as well as great insights from Magnus himself, it's all been thoroughly investigated as well by the team there. So a fantastic course to check out. And this is one of the reference games. There's an excellent reference games section. So check out Magnus's own insights, etc. at that course. So Kingscrusher TV / Magnus course. And yeah, comments, questions, likes, shares, all appreciated. Thanks very much.
Chess is simple. You just make the right moves.